It feels like the church has fused itself with the empire to such an extent that it's lost its prophetic voice. It's harming the very people that Jesus called us to serve, the stranger, the hungry, the poor, the powerless, the oppressed. And yet people deeply, legitimately believe that that's what God is calling us to do. It will never not be concerning to me.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora! Welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations with me, your host, Andy Dixon. To all my regular listeners, thanks so much for your ongoing support. It really does mean a lot. Some of you have shared with me recently how this podcast has been encouraging to you, which is actually really encouraging to me. Podcasting is this weird thing where I put episodes out into the world, but, if I like a podcast, I don't tell the podcaster, I go and tell my friends about it. So the fact that some of you have reached out is actually really meaningful, and I appreciate it deeply. So yeah, thank you for your support, and please do keep telling friends and sharing the podcast around as well. If you're new here, it's great to have you along. Thank you for joining us. This is a podcast where I talk to people who are doing good in the world in some way, hopefully encouraging us all that our little bit matters and that we can make a difference. Today I am joined by the wonderful Benjamin Cremer. Ben is a pastor who spends his time these days in the online space, in the intersection of Christianity and politics. Having grown up in white Christian nationalism in the U.S.A, Ben now gracefully explores how faith in Jesus offers a critique to policies and ideologies that many Christians actively support. We talk about his upbringing, the changes in his faith, the costs of those changes on relationships, and how his more open understanding of God has given him the ability to better love others. We also discuss how he interacts with people by challenging their beliefs and ideas while still holding grace for them, even when he feels that their beliefs are causing harm, which makes it a really encouraging but also very challenging conversation. This is episode 110 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Ben Cremer. Ben, kia ora, welcome to the podcast.
So good to be here, Andy.
I got you on the podcast because I follow you on social media, and I have been doing that for some time. How would you describe yourself and what you do to people who haven't encountered you?
Yeah, gosh, that's I feel like let me see if I can condense it down. I was just a pastor concerned about things going on in my country, and I started writing publicly to try to pastor people, mainly followers of Jesus, through the political climate that we're seeing. And it just kind of continued to grow. And I'm still doing that work. I call it spiritual formation because I really want to help people form a vocabulary of faith in the midst of really chaotic times.
Cool. That was really succinct. Lovely.
Just for the first time just now, so thank you for asking.
Nice. You can put that in your bio.
There you go. Yeah.
And so you're from Idaho.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of mountain time. That's a new thing to me. So there we go. You're in mountain time.
Mountain time. Yeah, it's a lot colder time zone. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's a much cooler name than just like naming it after the ocean or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
For those who don't know Idaho, including myself, can you just give us a broad sweep of what the religious and political landscape's like in the area that you're living?
Sure. Yeah, I've got Idaho. So born and raised here. Idaho gained its statehood because President Lincoln wanted to curb the Confederacy from gaining dominance here after the Civil War. And so it had a really big Confederate presence here, and they wanted to make Idaho a white dominant, agriculturally forward, limited government state. So it's described often in history books as a satellite of the South, and it's really kind of unknown to a lot of people that that's where its lineage came from.
Yeah, right.
And it's really kind of lived into that trajectory throughout history ever since. We're still like in the 90th percentile of white people, and we just don't really change in diversity that much ever. And we kind of, the dominant, religious landscape is Latter Day Saints and Christians. And of course, there's theological distinctions there. Latter Day Saints understand themselves to be Christians as well. I'm just
Yep.
mostly making the distinction there between dominant faith groups.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's more of the religious demographic, and we had, gosh, since 2013, we have some of the majority of private militia groups in Idaho. Because of its mountainous terrain, groups like that have places that they can just kind of build compounds and hide out. And so that
Wow.
really makes up a lot of the identity. Like the Aryan nations had a compound here in our panhandle for the longest time.
Wow.
Before they became defunct. So yeah, that's been an unfortunate part of Idaho's lineage, but I love Idaho because of how incredible a lot of the people are. The scenery here is just, I've traveled the world, and I love the place that I live, and I long for the culture and the community that we're building here to reflect the beauty of the state.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you became a pastor. Did you grow up in the church?
Yeah, so uh, grew up in a pretty fundamentalist sect of Christianity, became more evangelical oriented in middle school, high school, and then felt called to be a pastor around 7 years old and just couldn't let go of that call. And that led me to take a year off between high school and college. I was homeschooled K through 12, and I just didn't know where I wanted to go. I had a really hard experience with the church. Lots of church splits, lots of spiritual abuse, just a lot of difficulty there. And didn't think that the pastorate was going to be the right fit for me. But the Church of the Nazarene is a great big denomination here, and through them I started studying John Wesley, and I thought, if I could really understand this doctrine of grace and preach that, then I could have a place as a pastor. And so pursued the pastorate through Northwest Nazarene University and continued pursuing it ever since.
And so was that exploration sort of when your faith started to shift? Because,
Yeah,
if you're in that fundamental kind of space,
yeah,
that's quite different to a lot of what you're posting now.
yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
how did
Yeah.
that shift happen?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it was called it wasn't called deconstruction. I was deconstructing before it was a term, but it came to, and I really do think it's a really fundamental part of growing in faith. It's like if you're not opening up and expanding your faith, there's something that needs to be said about that. But yeah, it was through my theological education that I just started asking really deep questions about what I believe, being challenged about that in class, reading historical Christianity and compared to where I was coming from. And so just I had a faith crisis like every every couple of weeks in school. I was like, this is not what I grew up believing.
Yeah,
And I'd go back to my dorm room and just like yell at the ceiling, like, because when it comes to beliefs about God that's central to who you are, it's really unraveling. So that's really where I started to question things and just continue to faithfully follow Jesus in the midst of those questions to arrive at kind of my belief system today.
I think that's a really important point about the changing of faith over time.
Yeah.
Um, I really like that idea of evolving faith. That
Yeah.
your faith
Yeah.
needs to keep moving somehow. Evolving's a touchy word to use in some Christian circles, but
Sure.
but it's that idea of it can't stay the same. And actually, even in the most conservative spaces, it doesn't stay the same.
No, it
Um,
doesn't. No.
there's not many people who look back 10 years and go, "I believe exactly the same thing I used to believe." Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
and yet, if you're going through that and people get wind of it, often there's a like, "Oh no, what's happening?" It's like,
Yeah.
well, surely asking questions is really important as part of our faith.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
great to see you having gone through that and landed somewhere. I think that's the trickiest part for those of us who go through that kind of journey is
Mhm.
I mean, when I say landed somewhere, we're always going through that process
That's what I
of
was just gonna
changing and
say. Like,
adapting.
yeah,
So I don't know if
exactly.
you've landed somewhere, but you've
Yeah,
become comfortable with where
yeah,
you are.
yeah.
Um, yeah. What was that like after that sort of unsettling faith crisisy thing to suddenly go, I'm actually okay with where things are at with me.
Yeah, it was actually Kierkegaard. I read Fear and Trembling in, gosh, junior year of college, and the way that he framed in that short little tiny book, the way that he framed the journey of faith as an ongoing movement towards God, that God is not unknowable but infinitely knowable. That so much, even, I mean, I love my wife deeply, but I'm never going to know her completely. Am I going to take that as a point of um, doubt, or to continue to move deeper in love, and so that object of love that he really talked about in Fear and Trembling really reframed faith as more of a journey, a movement towards God every day, rather than an arrival point. Like, I'm going to get to a point, very colonial. I'm going to put my flag here, and this is my property. I've arrived at my relationship with God, and no more search, no more questions are needed. And I became much more faithful, or comfortable with uncertainty and the mysteries of God. And that made me so much more open to the mysteries in my neighbor, right? And so that started to, I started to learn that the journey of following Jesus is a continued experience of openness. Like, I'm being more open to God. I'm being made more open to my neighbor. I'm made more open to creation. And that openness transformed me and continues to transform me so that I can be more capable of love than I was before.
That's really beautiful. I talked to Tim Whitaker about this on his episode, but
Oh,
it'd be
yeah.
interesting to hear your perspective of why do you think churches are so afraid of people going through this questioning process?
Yeah. I think we can go back to the Protestant Reformation to answer that question really well. Like, why was there such resistance to Luther's 95 thesis? And it really does come around to institutionalism and money. Like, I really do think it's money and power. And I know it sounds old and cliche, but I think the resistance to questions is, you start asking questions, then the question of authority comes up really quickly, right? And if a church has built itself around being the authority of God rather than a community searching to love God and love neighbor,
Yeah,
then there's this tie to what they claim truth to be, and wealth and power, right? And so it's that centralized view of power, I think, is why there's such a threat signal around questions and doubt and questioning things. Because each sect of Christianity has a different emphasis on where they're going to land when it comes to, this is what we proclaim truth to be, and there's goodness in that, right? We learn from the various traditions of Christianity, but the way in which, like, the posture is really where my focus has been for a
yeah,
long time. Like, what's our posture of Christianity? Okay, we believe these things. Like, run down the bullet list. But what does that produce in the world? Like, what kind of people does that turn us out to be? Because that, it feels like, is the main question that Jesus is asking in his ministry.
yeah,
And if we're not producing good, loving, kind, like the fruits of the Spirit people, we need to question how we're pursuing our beliefs and our posture in the world. So I think there's a lot of suspicion around that once you start, like, rocking the boat around those things, because they've tied their entire corporation of church around this creed. That you question the creed, you start questioning how lucrative it is and how expansive that power is.
which I guess acts as a microcosm of our society in general, doesn't it? That
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
those same issues in play.
Exactly. Reflecting the world more than the kingdom. Yeah.
Yeah. Has your transition in faith, uh, has that affected relationships with family and friends?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it really has. I've at the beginning of writing publicly, I wrote down a few core values of what I wanted my public writing to be. I always wanted it to be kind. I always wanted it to be pastoral. Even when it was challenging, I didn't want to go on the side of shame, right? I wanted to be prophetic rather than, condemning. And so I've really tried to live into those values, but even doing that as carefully as I could, it inevitably led to me like having my uh, credentials stripped from the Church of the Nazarene and pushed out into the United Methodist Church. Kind of swooped in and brought me in there and restored my credentials, and it's caused me to lose friends and even family that disrupt those relationships as well. So there's a lot of loss. Like I had opportunities close up and people stopped, returning my calls. And it was a really difficult, grievous thing to start speaking up for, um, asking these questions more publicly, but also taking a stand for certain things more publicly too. So it was just really, really difficult.
Yeah, I guess I asked that question because I hear lots of people saying, "Oh, people, they're just taking the easy route," or they're giving up on truth and just following what they feel is good for them. It's
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
That's not my experience. That it doesn't sound like
No.
your experience.
No.
um, and
Yeah.
actually, yeah, most of the people who go through this process, that's not their experience.
Not at all.
Um,
No.
yeah, and so what makes it worth it?
I think, you know, I wonder if that's the right question, because I never really thought about it being, in terms of worth. I think it was really out of love, it was so hard to see my church moving in a direction that excluded people rather than included them, and become hostile and fearful and suspicious, and worship political power. I think it was, you start to really understand why Hosea and Jeremiah started losing their mind, because they loved their people so much. They were willing to risk everything to get them to come back to God, and so I really do think it was more out of love, because like if you look at it in the scales of worth, like I don't know if it was worth it. Like I lost a job, I lost, I had given 14 years of dedicated licensed service to this denomination that I really feel like betrayed me. I lost opportunities, career advancement, all those things, and relationships even. And it's like I don't know if it was, really worth it, but I would say it was out of love, like this desire to see repentance happen.
I think that's a really important response. Actually, that
Yeah.
we do get caught into that trap of weighing things up as is
Yeah.
this uh, progressing us, or is this productive, or all of those
Right.
things, and
Efficient.
actually
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
actually as Christians we are called to different metrics. Where
We really are. Yeah.
um, yeah, you specialize your work around that connection between faith and politics,
Hmm.
and like we've talked about, there's that same sort of power dynamic and
Yeah.
money and wealth involved there.
Yeah.
Is that, seeing that in the church, is that what drew you specifically to that particular niche?
Yeah. Yeah. So the Christian sect that I grew up in was very, like, the way people describe Christian nationalism. That's how I was raised. Like I didn't, my introduction into Christianity was that we needed to take back our country for God. That it was founded on, as a Christian nation, we were the good guys, everyone else were the bad guys, all other religions were false. And so I started off in a very nationalistic Christianity. And so then to come full circle back to what I believe the church to be. Um, and being in a denomination that was Wesleyan, I started seeing this nationalistic fundamentalism that I was raised with starting to creep in. And I think that's really what started my pastoral response, is that, hey, I was born and raised into this belief system, and I'm seeing it come in like full throttle into this denomination that doesn't claim to be fundamentalist. And so I really wanted to help people navigate through that, because it was like my native language that I wanted to warn against. And so that's really what led me to start writing more publicly and talking to people about it.
And what was the journey like in terms of most people I know who have some level of influence around internet space
Hmm.
didn't plan to do that initially.
Yeah,
They just were
right.
releasing some stuff, releasing some thoughts, and it just kind of evolved. So
Yeah,
what's your journey in that space been like?
that's exactly how it was like. I just started posting long things on Facebook. Like I really felt like I was writing way too long. Like it was more blog posts, but for my Facebook status. And it was like, well, 2015, 2016 when I started doing that. Very little traction. But then I wrote a letter to my former faith tradition, to evangelicalism, and that seemed to be the thing that started setting things off to gain more of a following. That it really resonated with people. But again, it was just a repeated writing out my heart and still pastoring, trying to pastor faithfully. And that post, for some reason, really resonated. It was the same thing I'd been writing before, but it really resonated with people, and that began the to where I am today.
What sort of people are engaging with the content that you're creating?
Yeah, so I like to use my weekly newsletter as kind of the metric for that, because I can really see more stats on that. And I have people ranging from agnostic, atheist, conservative, liberal, really a lot of people who are asking a ton of questions about their faith, but feel like they can have a one-on-one conversation with someone um, who they can be completely open with. And so that's I see a lot of variety in the newsletter space. As far as social media, I'm not sure. I get messages from a whole variety of people on the religious and non-religious spectrum, and I really appreciate that, because it challenges me too. Like someone responds in disagreement, but still kind. I learn from those engagements too. And so I see a lot of variety, but I think that the main audience that I have are people who are disenchanted with Christianity, asking questions of like, how did we get here? Why does it keep going? Like, how did we get here to where Christians are the most outspoken for a certain kind of political ideology in my country? And that's kind of the dominant audience that I have.
I think, as you just mentioned, people responding kindly.
Hmm.
Um, that's something, as I've followed your work, read your content, you critique policies, you critique Christian support for certain ideologies and certain politicians. Um, what I've never seen you do, and this goes back to what you were saying about how you wanted
Hmm.
to start, was I've never seen you attack people, dehumanize anyone, slam anyone. Um, how how do you walk that fine line between critiquing what people believe and stand for and tearing them down?
Yeah.
Um, and I guess especially when it is an issue that you're really passionate about, some of that you can see the passion dripping off the page
Yeah,
sometimes. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
how
It's
do you walk
hard.
that fine line?
It's so hard. I think a couple of metrics that I try to stick to with that is there's a beautiful thing about journaling on paper that no one will ever see. And so like you get all of those harsh, sharp thoughts out, right? Like cuz there's moments where you're really upset at the person and you want getting those words out are important, then you rip up the paper and throw it away, right? Cuz it's like I'm getting it out, this filth out of my heart so that it doesn't shape my words. And then Paul's perspective about that we're not against flesh and blood, but powers and principalities, like I think ideology falls into that like supremely. And so I really try to focus on the belief system, understanding that anyone is capable at arriving at these toxic behaviors that we're seeing, right? This harmful behavior towards other people. I think anyone is capable of doing that. And so I want to extend grace for the person, call out the ideology, like focus on the ideas. That cause us to be the kind of people that don't reflect Jesus, that are often opposite from Jesus Christ. And so I don't always do it well. Like I don't always do it well where I walk that fine balance, but that's the goal. That's what I'm trying to accomplish.
And I think for me that's what makes your work so powerful,
Mm.
is because it's not you having believed one thing and been outspokenly passionate about that, and then having swapped sides and
Yeah,
now throwing stones back at the people that are like you used to be.
yeah,
Um, there's a sense of actually, I've kind of become awake to some stuff,
hmm hmm
and that's shaped now how I see things.
right,
Um,
right.
I'm getting into dangerous territory calling you woke here, but um, I'm sure you get that enough. But
Yeah,
that's how it kind of comes across to me. Of now that I see things like this, how do I lead a discussion that could help other people see things like this?
exactly. Yeah,
Because I mean, there's so much division, isn't there? Like just us and them, and yeah,
absolutely. It's exhausting. It's so injurious to our hearts. I think this kind of division. And I was just praying this morning about the reciprocal and reactivity nature of shame. Like one side gets hurt, let's just divide it into two sides. One side gets really hurt, so they shame the other one, which hurts the other side, so then they shame, and it's like violence. It never ends. That cycle never ends. So when are we going to find a posture where we stand up for what we believe in, and we do it in love? Like, and I think it really does come down to that simple. Like, what take the mask situation through COVID. Like, I deeply believe in vaccines and masks because I'm like right down the road from St. Luke's. So many of my family members are medical professionals. Like, it was just a no brainer to me. But to see someone who disagreed with that shamed rather than all the other ways that you could approach that issue, right? And bring about understanding, being like, this is for other people. This is out of love for your neighbor. This is, all the ways that we could frame that issue rather than shame. Then it just entrenched them into their belief against masks. Like, so they're not going to change their mind now because they were so shamed and called a fool for that. And like, so that entrenchment in beliefs is like so counterproductive to me. It's like, I don't want them to stay in harmful beliefs. I want to journey with them together. And shame is the counterproductive tool. Like, I've been shamed and become more entrenched myself. So like that's not helpful either. And so that my prayer is like, I want to avoid shame at all costs and be clear and truthful, but compassionate and loving at the same time. And I don't think you can be clear and truthful without being compassionate and loving. Like,
mm,
it's you can't have one without the other.
mm. And especially if you look at the ministry of Jesus, a huge part of it was going around and releasing people from shame that people
Yeah,
had put on them,
yeah,
um, finding people who had been excluded and shamed and shunned,
hmm yeah.
and helping them connect back into community, and also we were talking about this the other day at our church, that the story of the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, and
Oh yeah.
makes this really public display of something that is very shameful in her culture.
hmm
And Jesus used it as an opportunity not only to interact with her, but to interact with those around her who had
Yeah.
been part of the problem.
Yeah.
Restoring her was actually also challenging them in a non-combative way
Yeah.
about the way that they treat the other people that weren't part of that interaction but are in the same
So
boat. And
powerful. Yeah.
um,
So powerful.
yeah, and yet, like you say, if you're just convinced that you're right about, say, the mask situation, and you start shaming
Yeah.
someone because they're not wearing one, then actually, especially if they're doing it for what they believe to be religious reasons,
Yeah.
then they're feeling attacked, which then they would just pass off as spiritual warfare,
Exactly. Or
Um,
persecution, whatever. Yeah.
yeah, all of those things. So we really don't do ourselves any service by
No.
responding in those kind of ways.
It blew my mind because in seminary, I was learning about the woman with the issue of blood and like fell in love with all of the components you just laid out so well. And then realized that Zacchaeus is the same story
Yeah,
where but the tax collector is the bad guy. I mean, like, but Jesus is like, I'm going to go to your house. Yeah. And salvation is going to come to your house. And can you imagine the crowd? This tax collector, like, do you know what he does for work? Right. But like, he is also making a pathway for the oppressor to stop oppressing. Like salvation like saves both the oppressed and the oppressor if the oppressor will allow it. It's just
yeah,
it is that's radical to me, and
yeah,
like so the gospel just won't let you rest in your binary thinking. And I think that's for a fundamentalist who that's all I knew. It was good and evil. The world was clear cut, black and white. For a fundamentalist to finally understand the gospel in a really deep way, it didn't let me be safe or comfortable in my binaries anymore.
yeah. I mean, this is a really good reminder for people in any part of the church or political spectrum,
Yeah.
because it's not a left or right thing.
No.
Because actually, you see this same behavior right across the spectrum,
Yeah.
in terms of the negative stuff.
Yeah.
And you also see people, on all sides who do want to do it in a loving way and do want to engage in a way that brings others along with them.
And it's like we stop asking these really good questions about like how did Jesus have a zealot and a tax collector and then a Pharisee and like all of these different, was it because he was laying out this like new ideologies like, okay, you have your side but come to my side. It's like he was actually walking in the way of God that brought people together in the midst of their diversity and then called them deeper, called them to a new way of life that didn't make them abandon who they were, but actually grow deeper as people in their pursuit of God and one another. And like that to me is way more powerful than any side could promise you. And so that I, in full transparency, like once, like you said, I went from one side to another. Um, I really started to become as fundamentalist
Yeah,
on my new side
yeah,
as I was on my
totally.
old ones. Like, and it took a lot of years through college, through seminary to be like, no, the goal is to abandon fundamentalism because that starts with me believing that I have all the answers. And once I do that, then I'm not embodying God. I'm embodying myself and worshiping my beliefs as if they are God. And so it's still been wrecking me, so deeply about like, how do I present my beliefs in a loving way? And that is so hard. Like some days I just give up writing something, like I'll abandon it because it's like, I can't do this without being hateful and shaming. And so you'll have Word documents open with just all this stuff that it's never going to see the light of day because I don't want to resort to that because I know how hurtful it can be, and I don't want to do that to other people. But man, it's so hard. It's just so
Mm.
it's so difficult.
And I think that really highlights the idea that this is not about you not having those feelings. This is
Yes, exactly.
it's not what you're presenting on the internet is not the full story of who you are.
Right.
but it is the story of you choosing this path of interaction. And that's
Yes.
like a choice we've all got to make every day is, while I feel like this and while I believe these things, how will I choose to engage with the world?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I think the critique that maybe you've heard this before yourself. It sounds like you have, given your experience in the church. But I think a common critique I have is from people is that, well, you're wishy washy. You don't have strong convictions about things anymore because you're trying to have this posture of compassion or empathy or what have you. But really, like I believe in certain absolutes. I believe in truth. I believe it really does come down to how I want to present those things in the world. And I think there's a deeper representation. Like, would you call Jesus a person that lacked conviction? Like, he went to a cross, for crying out loud, because he believed in stuff so deeply. But he was compassionate and he was loving and justice seeking, and like all the all the attributes that we long for in our lives he embodied. But he wasn't an authoritarian, like he wasn't a bully. And so,
Yeah,
like, that to me, I think, is a huge part of the character of the gospel, is embodying that witness rather than just staking your claim on this list of beliefs that you think are right and then bludgeoning people over the head with them. Like, that to me is, no matter what you believe, that's wrong.
yeah,
No
yeah,
matter what you think is truthful, that's a wrong way to be in the world.
yeah. I was saying even to my church congregation the other day, and it gets back to the wishy washy thing of,
Yeah.
not picking sides or whatever. It's like, well, actually, I believe in love so strongly
Hmm.
that this is how I'm going to choose to do it.
Amen.
And
Yeah.
what I said
Amen.
was, there are certain people, particularly in the political sphere, both in your country and mine, who are really testing my ability to love my neighbor
Hmm.
and to love my enemy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and even the fact that I would frame them as my enemy is a challenge to me.
Yeah.
Of
Absolutely.
why aren't I calling them my neighbor?
Yeah.
Um, and so, but because I passionately believe in that, I have to then keep choosing that and going, what does that mean for how I walk it out? Which again is actually not the easy option out.
It's not.
The path you're walking is not, well, you've lost your convictions and now it's just easier for you. It's actually really challenging.
So
um,
challenging.
and actually, I mean, you look at the life of Jesus, that was not an easy life,
No,
you
it
know.
was not.
Um,
But he
and
says his yoke will be easy and his
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
I
I think,
mean, that's a
yeah,
classic case of how we can take anything that in the Bible and just like twist it for the way that we believe
for sure.
things are working. And
But honestly, like, I think there is so much truth in what we're talking about here in regards to that phrase. Like, I love the way
yeah,
the Message translation, like, are you tired and burned out on religion?
yeah,
Come to me and I will give you rest for your soul. Like, love the way that Peterson phrased that, because he was in a world of religious dogma, and he was offering a way that released people from their burdens.
yeah,
And as I have shifted from fundamentalism, I feel myself like I'm less exhausted because I'm not trying to prove myself to be the ambassador of the only true God in the world, right? Or that I've arrived at the only source of truth in the world, right? And the defender of that truth. Like, that's an exhausting way to live, and to constantly have an enemy around every corner, right?
yeah,
I am feeling lighter because I am not the center of my belief system. Like, God and neighbor are, as Jesus calls us to
yeah.
be. So again, that,
And when you don't have to live that life of
yeah,
fear of the other, fear of the future,
yep,
um, fear of what if I haven't got it quite right? What if
yeah,
I've got a belief wrong and I miss out?
yeah, yeah,
That
exactly.
stuff wears you out, man.
It really does. Like, intellectually, physically, all relationally. Like, you talk about exhausting relationships, living in that way. So it really is an easier
Yeah.
way of life internally and relationally, but it's a very difficult one because you can't help but stand up for those who are pushed to the margins, you know? And so that, I think that's really what made things go really difficult for Jesus, is because he wouldn't stop agitating for the poor, the powerless, the marginalized.
Mm. That's what makes me, I was going to say laugh. It doesn't really make me laugh. It makes me sad, angry, something.
Yeah.
I get really confused when people talk about, well, Jesus didn't get involved in politics. It's like everything he did had a
Everything.
political focus, you know,
Yep.
because politics is just about the way we order our society.
That's exactly right.
Everything he did was about how we order our society.
Yeah.
Um, and it just blows my mind of you either get the we need to create a political thing and do it our way, the Christian way, or well, Jesus didn't get involved in politics, so I'm just going to kind of let what happens happen. So what? um, yeah, looking at the political landscape, you know, we're quite different here in New Zealand in terms of our structure, so we don't have quite the same focus on individual people, although of late um, there's been a few individual people who have kind of taken a bit of a prominent role in our government. But even then, like when I look at what's happening in your country, what's happening in our country, there's still that very populist kind of politics stuff playing on fears around immigration, on race, transphobia, you know, all these hot button issues that polarize people, get votes. Um, when you look at, I mean, because you've been working in this kind of space for a while now, looking at politics and religion,
Yeah.
what's your biggest concern when it comes to the church and politics in your environment?
Yeah. I think if I could put it into one phrase, it's that we're masquerading around as if we're following Jesus, but we're just embodying Caesar. Um, you know, if you can't tell the difference between Christianity and bullies, then we're doing something wrong. It feels like the church has fused itself with the empire to such an extent that it's lost its prophetic voice. It's harming the very people that Jesus called us to serve: the stranger, the hungry, the poor, the powerless, the oppressed. And yet people deeply legitimately believe that it's the right thing to do, that's what God is calling us to do. And that to me is just so, it will never not be concerning to me that that way of being in the world is sanctioned by God. To believe that is just utterly baffling to me. And so I think that's what really fuels my work, is to continue to try to break and poke some holes in that belief system, to say, like, why why are you believing the most wealthy and powerful people when they demonize the poorest and powerless people? Like, what about that sounds truthful? And where was Jesus found? He wasn't found among the powerful and wealthy. He was always among the poor. He was born among the poor and the powerless. It's just like, so that I think is my deepest concern, and that the church turns around in the name of religious persecution in my country, like this unfounded idea that Christians are being persecuted in my country will be turn around, and the church will become the source of persecution towards other people who are not like them. Like, that to me is the most flagrant form of taking Christ's name.
Mm. Mm. Yep. Yeah.
It's no wonder people don't want to be Christian. Like, seeing what's going on, I do not blame people for wanting, like, so many of my followers will say, I've abandoned the name Christian. I still follow Jesus, but I can't call myself that in our context right now. And I do not blame people for that. Just saying I'm a follower of Jesus, like that. That to me is so justifiable, because it's so hard to want to associate. Again, it goes back to the powers and principalities, to associate with that kind of behavior in the world. It's so hard. It's hurting so many people.
Mm. Where do you find hope?
I find hope in I'm deeply convinced, like, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, their narratives about where hope is always found. They nailed it when it came to hope being found in the quiet, calm places of the world. It's not in the, like Elijah, it's not in the earthquake or the fire or the wind, these loud places. Hope is found in the still small voice. And I think in our world today, the loudest voices are also the most concerning. You're not going to hear hopeful, loving, kind voices platformed, because it doesn't make money. Like, it'll keep our eyeballs glued if it's super concerning and fear based, right? And so I really strive to look for the quiet, calm voices, and see diligent people helping people. Mr. Rogers would say, "Look for the helpers," and like that's where I find my hope, is people that are not giving up on loving their neighbor boldly and helping.
What's next for Ben Cremer heading into the future?
Yeah, so I'm working on a book with Brazos Press. It's focusing on the incarnation, God becoming a human, and why it's important. It's about this very thing, why it's important that we value people over ideology, and that should be out next spring, if all goes well. So that's where a lot of my time and my effort is going. My wife and I are expecting our third
Oh,
baby
congratulations.
in August, and so a little boy. We have a little 3-year-old, and our daughter just turned 1, and
Oh,
so
wow.
our son will be born in August,
Yeah.
and we are done. We are
Yeah.
done.
Three's busy, I can tell you.
Three's busy. We're
I've,
already so busy.
I've got 3 hours span from
Oh
13,
wow!
13 to 6.
Oh wow!
Our lot.
Okay.
So it is
You
busy,
know,
but it's beautiful.
yeah. So I'm looking forward to meeting him, and so I'm really focusing on my book. I'm working on a few devotionals for the season to come. Continuing working on my newsletter, of course, and then podcasts and stuff like this. I just relaunched my preaching podcast, and so I'm doing that every week to provide a sermon, especially for those who feel like they don't have the faith community right now.
Yeah, cool.
Trying to create some more resources for people who find themselves in between church communities. So
And so how do people find that? How do people follow you? How do people
yeah,
support you?
so I'm on Facebook. My newsletter is called Into the Gray, and that's the name of the podcast as well. And you can subscribe there through email. Everything's free. I try my best to keep everything ad free. And that's where a lot of my faithful followers who do contribute towards that project really help to keep things ad free. So my gratitude is for them, because then I don't have to do any ads along the way. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Substack, TikTok. I try to be wherever people are, that they're on their most comfortable platform.
Yeah.
So if you just search Ben Cremer Into the Gray, then you can kind of find links to everything
Yeah,
else.
cool. And I'll chuck all that in the show notes as well, so it's
Yeah,
easy for people to
wonderful.
find.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you so much for the just the chance to chat today.
yeah,
It's always really encouraging talking to like minds and people that have been on similar journeys, um, and I find the way that you talk about faith really inspiring and encouraging, and I'm sure many of our listeners will as well. So, thank you for sharing. Thank you for the public work that you do. Thank you for helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
yeah. It really, really means a lot, Andy, and I so appreciate the work that you're doing, and I mean, all the stuff that God is opening the doors for you now, given your faith journey and things like that. So I really count you as a peer, and that we're really in this together as colleagues. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Hello, hello heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
I love how Ben manages to critique and challenge but never dehumanize. It's such a powerful example for us all in how to engage with those we disagree with. And it's clear that Ben feels very strongly about what he posts, yet still manages to engage gracefully anyway. I'm really looking forward to his book and also to see what else comes out of his work. So make sure to find him online and follow him for more encouragement and challenge. And you can find some links to those in the show notes. Ben, thank you for who you are and for what you do. Here is a blessing for you. Ben, as you continue to explore the broadness of the love of God, may you continue to find a love that fills, that challenges, and that grows you in the direction of justice and grace. May you continue to find joy in the mystery and comfort in the uncertainty, and may your embrace of the mystery in others lead to wonderful connections and friendships that you would otherwise never have had. As you ready yourself for the arrival of your third child, may you learn so much about yourself and about the love of God from your role as a dad. May your children grow to know the love of God in real and expansive ways. As your world expands and grows, may your marriage also flourish, finding a deep connection as you continually explore the mystery of one another. May your book writing be transformative, with encouragement in the challenging times, words flowing when you need them, with thoughts that you're not even sure where they've come from. May it go on to impact many, challenging and encouraging them with the life and love of Jesus. Lastly, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Join me next time when I talk to Lindy Jacob, founder of the Olive Leaf Network here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, who support people as they come out of high-demand religious spaces such as the Plymouth Brethren or Jehovah's Witness. We talk about Lindy's own journey of leaving what was then the exclusive Brethren, losing family, friends, employment, and a faith community, and not knowing anything about how the world actually works. And we talk about why and how the Olive Leaf Network came about, and how they practically help those looking to escape those spaces. It's another powerful conversation. Until then, me enoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Humai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia. Engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino. Amen.